Welcome to New Jersey Capitol Report. I'm Rafael P. Roman.
And I'm Steve Adubato. We're pleased to have Dr. Nancy Blattner, who is the president of Caldwell College. She's been with us many times talking about big picture issues in higher education. But before we do that, big picture issues in Rome. Interestingly, you and some of your colleagues, together with some students from Caldwell College, were at the Vatican, Palm Sunday, at a very critical and interesting time. Describe it.
It was just awesome. We were about 15 feet away from Pope Francis when he came out in his Pope Mobile on Palm Sunday, and there wasn't a dry eye in the group of students, my husband, my staff member, or myself. We were just so awestruck by his humility. He was obviously very prayerful, and yet at the same time, he was interacting with the audience. People were handing him babies to kiss, and he was taking presents from people who were there to celebrate Mass. It was just a joyous and a very beautiful occasion.
And Caldwell College is, in fact, a Catholic institution, and it was significant on many levels.
And that's why we were there, because the students were completing a 3-credit theology course over spring break, and we thought what better place to do it than in the birthplace of Christianity in Rome. And also there's a tremendous Dominican link. Caldwell College is a Dominican institution, and so St. Dominic 800 years ago was there and lived there. It was a very prayerful experience to be in the room, a very austere room, where St. Dominic lived and prayed, and to pray with the students in that space. It was just a beautiful experience.
Amazing. It's terrific.
Shifting gears from the Vatican to higher ed, Raf.
Okay, higher ed here in New Jersey, not as elevated as the Vatican, but still
we'll try.
High up there. For years, everybody knows, and I'm sure you know better than most, higher education has been in the back burner as far as state support. What has been the effect of that, do you think, to the state, overall, its economy, its future?
I think part of what we've seen happen is that New Jersey has the largest export of high school students to other states in the United States. Many people are unaware that 28,000 students leave the state every year to go to college in another state, more than come into the state. So that's a tremendous brain drain, as it's being called. And I think that that's something that we need to address. Hopefully, because of the wonderful initiative that occurred last November, when 63% of the voters in this state approved a $750 million bond initiative, we're going to see a turnaround.
To higher ed.
Yes, to higher ed.
Is that enough, $750 million, I mean, for the higher education system of New Jersey that's been on the back burner for so many years?
Well, you know, I don't want to be greedy, because of course we'd always like to think there could be more, but I think everyone was most appreciative, particularly since it had been 24 years since such an initiative had been passed. And along with that $750 million, there has been another several $100 million added, so well over $1 billion that will allow institutions of higher education to address capital improvements, deferred maintenance, technology infrastructure, equipment leasing, and a lot of areas, frankly, that we simply didn't have the funds to address for the last dozen or more years. So I think we're going to see a resurgence in higher education in the state.
Nancy, one of the issues that Raphael and I, for these 20 years we've been doing the show, that comes up in higher ed consistently is access to higher ed, tuition, high tuition, the difficulty of students, particularly those who do not have the means getting into school.
Less privilege.
You talk a lot about completion, a completion agenda, not just getting in, but...
Absolutely. Well, access is still an issue. And so I do want to say just briefly that something I read recently suggested that if students come from the highest income quartile, families in that highest income quartile, about 80% of them will go to college and finish a degree, a 4-year degree. On the other hand, from the lowest quartile, it's about 1 in 10.
Really?
So yes.
That will actually complete their degree.
Complete a degree.
Wow.
So we know that there's a tremendous number of untapped and very bright students who are coming from the lower socioeconomic strata that are not getting college educations. And Steve, as you know, that's very dear to me, because I come from that kind of a background.
So a lot of them don't have access, and those who do have access, many of them do not complete the 4 years.
Absolutely.
So what are you going to do about that? What can you do about that?
Well, I think one thing that colleges and universities have to do right now is to recognize that we're dealing with a very different student than students even were like when my own children went to college, and that is we're dealing with adults. And many of them have responsibilities that we and our children did not have. So we're looking at people who are not just working one part-time job, they're working multiple part-time jobs or a full-time job. They're juggling family responsibilities. perhaps children, could be parents, siblings, or grandparents. That's a very common theme on my campus. So we have to provide education to meet their needs. That means, for example, evening classes, weekend classes. There was an article recently in the paper about a college that went to midnight classes, and it was very popular, and people were surprised.
I'd go to that class.
And I thought, why are people surprised if they know about the habits of
So
young people?
you are redefining completion. In other words, if the students are now adults who work, maybe they don't complete in 4 years. Maybe they complete in 6 or 7, or who knows how many years. But they complete.
I think that's important. And I think that, I understand why, for all kinds of reasons, governments and other agencies have to keep track. And so generally, the idea is that a 4-year degree is considered to be completed if it's done in 150% of the time in 6 years. But there are some students for whom that's simply not possible for a whole host of reasons. I think completion is something that's the new buzzword because everyone's looking to see if we can meet President Obama's mandate that we have the most educated citizenry in the world. And in order to do that in the next decade or 15 years or so, to have 60%.
How far away are we from that goal?
Well, we are quite far away from it. In the United States, we have about a 28% rate of adults having some college, either a 2 or a 4-year degree. In New Jersey, we're 5th in the nation with 34.5%. But you can understand that in a dozen years, even if we throw everything we have at the problem, we're not going to increase to 60%, either in our state or nationally, in my opinion.
And no one school, Caldwell or any other institution, can do this alone. It is a societal responsibility, and all of us have to be involved in this.
We all do. And I think we also need to keep in mind that we're telling students today that you're going to have somewhere between 6 and 11 careers, not 6 and 11 jobs, 6 and 11 careers. So we know that over a course of 40 or 50 years of work, these students cannot be prepared when they graduate for college for that 9th or 10th or 11th position. But what Caldwell College can do, and other institutions like it, is to give students a very strong skill set that will allow them to continue to learn as they go forward. So if students, for example, are excellent communicators, they can speak cogently and they write well, they're good critical thinkers, they work well as a member of a team or individually, then they will be able to take those skills, learn the necessary specific entities for any job, and be successful.
Nancy, I want to thank you for joining us and always giving us an update, but also challenging us in the area of higher ed. Thanks so much, Doctor.
Nancy, thank you
It
so
was
much.
great to be
Appreciate
with you. Thank you.
Stay with us. Raphael and I will be right back after this as Capitol Report continues. We'll be right back.